My beloved child. Do not pass by this moment too quickly. Something has quietly crossed your path that was meant to reach you today. The reason your eyes have found these words is not because of chance within this story, but because the next few moments carry a mystery that has waited far longer than you can imagine to be uncovered. Stay with this message until the end, because every sentence brings you closer to a truth that has remained hidden beneath years of unanswered questions. You have wondered why certain doors closed just as your heart was ready to walk through them. You have questioned why someone who seemed so deeply connected to your soul appeared to drift away without giving you the answers you deserved. There were nights when silence spoke louder than words, and you searched your memories over and over, hoping to discover what you had done wrong. Yet the answer was never where you were looking. Listen carefully, beloved child, because this is where the hidden story begins. There was a truth buried beneath layers of fear, timing, and unseen circumstances. It was not buried because you were unworthy. It was buried because not every chapter is revealed while it is still being written. Some pages remain sealed until the hearts involved are finally strong enough to understand what they contain. Do not scroll away now. There is still something waiting to be uncovered. The one your heart has carried for so long also carried questions that were never spoken aloud. More than once they stood at the edge of a decision that could have changed everything. More than once they reached toward the future they secretly imagined with you. Yet every time they stepped forward, an invisible weight pulled them back. You never saw that struggle. You only saw the distance. You only heard the silence. But silence is not always the absence of love. Sometimes it is the sound of a battle taking place where no one else can witness it. Even now, as these words unfold, another piece of the mystery begins to rise. There were moments when your soulmate wanted to explain everything, but every attempt dissolved before it reached you. Circumstances became walls. Doubts became chains. Old wounds whispered that happiness was too dangerous to trust. They convinced themselves that walking away would protect both hearts, never realizing that unanswered questions often hurt more than painful truths. Pause here for one more moment. The greatest surprise has not yet arrived. You believed the story ended with separation, but heaven watched a different story unfolding behind the scenes. Every disappointment became part of a path that neither of you could yet understand. While you mourned what seemed lost forever, unseen pieces continued moving into place like stars aligning long before dawn. What if the reason everything felt delayed was not rejection? What if the delay itself was protecting something far greater? Keep listening, because the answer is closer than it has ever been. For a long time, a single hidden truth remained locked away. Very few could have recognized it. Fewer still were ready to accept it. But hidden truths have a remarkable way of finding daylight when the appointed moment arrives. That moment is beginning. Somewhere, memories that were once ignored have started returning with unusual clarity. Forgotten conversations suddenly carry new meaning. Small details that seemed unimportant now point towards something astonishing. Even the moments that once looked like endings are beginning to resemble preparations for another beginning. Can you feel how everything is slowly connecting? Do not leave yet. The most important revelation has not been spoken. Your heart has carried unanswered prayers longer than you realize. Every tear, every quiet hope, every whispered wish has echoed far beyond what your eyes could see. None of it disappeared into emptiness. Every question remained alive, waiting for the right moment to receive its missing piece. And now, something has changed. A truth that remained hidden for years has finally begun to surface. It is a truth capable of rewriting everything you believed about why your paths separated. It explains the hesitation, the silence, the impossible timing, and the invisible burden that neither of you fully understood. But before that truth can be revealed completely, one final veil must be lifted. When it falls, nothing about this story will look the same again. And that is where this chapter must pause. My beloved child. Do not look away now, because the veil that has covered this story for so long is beginning to tremble. The answer your heart has searched for is closer than it has ever been, yet it cannot be rushed. Some revelations lose their meaning when they arrive too quickly. This one must unfold one heartbeat at a time. Take another moment and remain here. There is still something extraordinary waiting to be uncovered. The hidden truth was never simply about two people being separated. It reached much deeper than that. Long before your paths crossed, invisible burdens were already shaping the choices that would later affect both of you. Wounds carried from years that neither of you could erase became silent voices influencing every decision. Your soulmate often appeared stronger than they truly were. Behind quiet smiles and ordinary conversations lived questions they were afraid to ask, fears they refused to confess, and memories they believed no one could understand. They convinced themselves that protecting everyone else meant hiding their own heart. That decision changed everything. There came a moment one that almost no one noticed when they stood between two futures. One future led toward the connection they secretly desired with you. The other promised safety through distance. Fear disguised itself as wisdom, and hesitation disguised itself as responsibility. Without realizing it, they chose silence. You experienced the absence, but you never witnessed the battle that created it. Stay with this message, beloved child. Another layer is about to unfold. There were times when your name crossed their mind unexpectedly. A familiar song, a passing place, an ordinary afternoon, or a quiet evening would suddenly awaken memories they thought had disappeared. They tried to ignore those moments, believing they were only echoes of the past. But the echoes refused to fade. Instead, they became stronger. Questions they had buried began returning. What if I misunderstood everything? What if walking away was never the answer? Those thoughts arrived quietly at first, like distant whispers carried by the wind. Then they grew impossible to silence. Meanwhile, you continued wondering why everything had become so confusing. You searched for explanations within yourself. You questioned your own worth. You replayed conversations again and again, hoping to discover the mistake that pushed them away. Yet the missing answer was never hidden inside your flaws. It was hidden inside a truth they had not yet faced. Pause here for a moment. The greatest revelation has still not been spoken. There is something remarkable about time. It has a way of exposing what fear once concealed. The stories people tell themselves eventually collide with reality. Masks become heavy. Secrets become exhausting. Even hearts that have hidden for years begin longing for honesty. That season has quietly begun. Without fully understanding why, your soulmate has started seeing old memories differently. Situations that once appeared hopeless now reveal details they overlooked. Conversations they dismissed suddenly feel important. Even the silence between you has started speaking in ways they never expected. And with every realization, one question grows louder inside them. What really kept us apart? The answer is closer than either of you knows. It is not as simple as bad timing. It is not as simple as misunderstanding. It is not even as simple as fear. There is another piece still waiting beneath the surface, a forgotten moment, a hidden decision, a truth that changed the direction of both lives without either of you recognizing its importance. That forgotten moment is beginning to return. Once it is fully remembered, every unanswered question will begin fitting together like pieces of a puzzle that has waited years to be completed. Do not leave now. Because in the next chapter, the first person who uncovered that long-buried truth will finally step into the light, and what they reveal has the power to change the entire story forever. My beloved child. The silence has carried this secret for far too long, but silence cannot guard the truth forever. Every hidden story eventually reaches the moment when it asks to be told, and that moment is drawing near. If your heart has stayed with this message until now, do not stop. The next piece of this fictional journey may change the way you see everything that came before. There was someone who unknowingly held a missing piece of the story. They never realized how important their memory would become. What once seemed like an ordinary conversation, a passing remark, or an unnoticed event was actually connected to a much larger picture. For years, that memory rested quietly, unnoticed like an old letter tucked inside a forgotten book. Life continued moving forward, seasons changed, people grew older, and yet the truth patiently waited for the day when every heart involved would finally be ready to hear it. That day has begun to arrive. Meanwhile, your soulmate found themselves returning to places they thought they had outgrown, not always with their footsteps, but with their thoughts. Memories began appearing without warning. They remembered little details they had dismissed years ago. They remembered words they once misunderstood. They remembered moments when they almost reached out but stopped at the very last second. Each memory carried the same quiet question. What if everything I believed was incomplete? Stay with this story. The greatest discovery is still ahead. As those forgotten memories surfaced, another realization followed close behind. They began noticing that many of their past decisions had not truly come from peace. They had come from assumptions. Assumptions built on fear, uncertainty, and circumstances that never revealed the whole picture. The walls they believed were permanent suddenly began showing small cracks. Light entered where certainty once lived. For the first time in a long while, they allowed themselves to imagine another possibility. What if the connection they had tried to bury was never meant to disappear? What if it had simply been waiting? At the same time, your own journey had been shaping you in ways you could not fully recognize. Every disappointment had quietly strengthened your compassion. Every unanswered question had taught patience. Every season of waiting had refined your heart instead of hardening it. None of those moments were meaningless within this story. Every chapter was preparing both of you for a truth that neither version of yourselves could have carried years ago. Pause here for just a little longer. Another hidden layer is beginning to unfold. The forgotten witness finally looked back at that old memory with fresh eyes. What once seemed ordinary now revealed something astonishing. There had been a misunderstanding so small that almost no one noticed it at the time, yet its consequences echoed through countless decisions afterward. It was never a lack of care. It was never the absence of love. It was the power of an incomplete story. And incomplete stories often create complete misunderstandings. As this realization spread, the weight your soulmate had carried for so long began to shift. Questions they had buried returned with greater urgency than ever before. They felt an unexpected pull toward unfinished conversations, toward words left unsaid, toward a chapter they believed had already ended. They could no longer ignore it. Something inside them whispered that the truth deserved to be faced at last. But one final mystery remained. There was still one detail no one had uncovered, a single missing piece that connected every unanswered question, every delayed moment, every unexpected separation, and every silent goodbye into one remarkable revelation. When that final piece is revealed, the entire story will transform. And that revelation is waiting just beyond the next chapter. My beloved child. The story has now reached the place where hidden echoes begin to speak louder than silence. If you have remained until this moment, continue a little farther, because the next part of this fictional message carries a revelation that has waited through countless seasons to be understood. Imagine standing before a door that has been locked for years. Every attempt to open it before now would have failed, not because you lacked the key, but because the time had not yet arrived. Now, slowly and almost imperceptibly, the lock begins to turn. Something extraordinary is about to be revealed. Your soulmate found themselves unable to ignore the quiet stirring within their heart any longer. Ordinary days no longer felt ordinary. Familiar places awakened forgotten emotions. Even simple moments carried an unexpected sense that an unfinished chapter was asking to be revisited. At first, they resisted it. They told themselves it was only nostalgia. They believed it would fade with time. But instead of disappearing, the feeling became clearer. It was as though every memory had been waiting patiently for one final piece before revealing its true meaning. Stay with this message. The most remarkable discovery has not yet been spoken. Then, without warning, an old conversation resurfaced in their mind. It had seemed insignificant years ago, a few sentences, a misunderstanding, a moment that passed too quickly to notice. Yet now, viewed through wiser eyes, every word carried a completely different meaning. The silence that followed that conversation had never been empty. It had been filled with assumptions. Assumptions became distance. Distance became uncertainty. Uncertainty slowly became a story both of you accepted as truth, even though it was built upon incomplete understanding. That realization shook them more deeply than they expected. For the first time, they stopped asking, "Why did everything fall apart?" Instead, they began asking, "What if everything was built on something we never questioned?" That single question changed the direction of their heart. Pause here for just a moment. There is still another layer beneath the surface. As they searched through old memories, they discovered something they had overlooked countless times. It was not a dramatic event. It was not a loud announcement. It was one quiet decision made during a season of fear, a decision that seemed small in the moment but quietly redirected the path of two lives. Neither of you fully understood its importance. Neither of you realized how much rested upon it. Yet that one choice created years of unanswered questions. Still, even within this story, no season remains hidden forever. Truth has a remarkable way of finding those who are finally ready to receive it. And now the buried truth has begun revealing itself piece by piece. Your soulmate is no longer seeing the past through the same eyes. They recognize moments where fear spoke louder than hope. They recognize opportunities that slipped away because uncertainty disguised itself as wisdom. Most importantly, they recognize that the story they believed for so long was never the complete story. That realization has awakened something unexpected. Not regret alone. Not longing alone. But a deep desire to understand what truly happened. And that desire is leading them toward the final hidden piece. Do not leave yet. The greatest revelation is still waiting. Because there is one person, someone who unknowingly witnessed the turning point years ago, who is finally about to speak. Their words will uncover the last missing detail, the detail that explains why your paths separated when everything seemed ready to come together. Once those words are spoken, every unanswered question, every silent goodbye, and every lingering mystery will begin to make perfect sense. But that long-hidden testimony has not yet been fully revealed. Its moment begins in Part 5. My beloved child. You have followed this fictional journey through layers of silence, unanswered questions, and hidden memories. Now the story arrives at the edge of a revelation that has remained unseen for what feels like an eternity. Do not leave this moment too quickly, because the next few words uncover a truth that no one expected to resurface. Sometimes the loudest answers are not discovered in dramatic moments. They arrive quietly, almost like the first light before sunrise. They seem ordinary at first, yet once they are understood, nothing appears the same again. That is exactly where this story now stands. The person who unknowingly carried the missing piece did not wake one morning intending to change anyone's future. They were simply sorting through old memories, reflecting on conversations long forgotten. Then, almost unexpectedly, one detail returned with remarkable clarity. It was not what had been said. It was what had never been explained. In that instant, everything began connecting. The pauses. The hesitation. The distance. None of them had been random. Each one pointed toward the same hidden misunderstanding that had quietly shaped the choices of two hearts. Stay with this message. The greatest turning point is only beginning. Far away, your soulmate found themselves experiencing something they could not describe. Familiar dreams returned. Forgotten emotions surfaced without warning. They felt an unexplainable pull to revisit moments they had spent years trying to leave behind. Every memory asked the same silent question. What if I never knew the whole truth? That question refused to leave. It followed them through ordinary days and peaceful nights. It appeared in moments of stillness when there was nothing left to distract the heart. The more they reflected, the more they realized that certainty had slowly dissolved into curiosity. And curiosity became courage. For the first time in years, they became willing to look beyond the version of events they had always believed. Pause for just another moment. There is still one more veil to lift. The forgotten witness finally understood why that old memory had never left them completely. It was because one sentence spoken long ago had been misunderstood by everyone who heard it. Each person carried away a different interpretation, and those different interpretations quietly created years of separation. No one intended for it to happen. No one recognized its consequences. Yet one misunderstood moment became the foundation of an entire story that was never fully true. As this realization settled in, something remarkable happened. Instead of blaming the past, your soulmate began seeing it with compassion. Instead of holding tightly to old conclusions, they became open to new understanding. The walls that once seemed impossible to cross no longer looked permanent. Hope quietly entered where certainty had once stood. But even now, one final mystery remains untouched. There is another layer beneath everything you have heard so far, a hidden detail that explains why this truth remained buried for so long. It was protected not by distance, nor by time alone, but by a sequence of events that had to unfold in exactly the right order before anyone could recognize what had really happened. That final piece is closer than ever. It has already begun moving into place. And when it is revealed, the reason your soulmate could not be with you will no longer feel like an unsolved mystery within this story. Instead, it will become the key that unlocks every unanswered chapter. The final hidden truth is almost ready to be spoken. And when it is, nothing in this fictional journey will ever look the same again. My beloved child. The moment has arrived to step beyond assumptions and into the heart of this fictional story's deepest mystery. You have remained through every unanswered question, every quiet pause, and every hidden clue. Do not turn away now, because what comes next begins to illuminate the reason the truth stayed hidden for so very long. Have you ever noticed how a single misunderstanding can cast a shadow far larger than the moment that created it? In this story, that shadow stretched across years. It changed choices, redirected dreams, and convinced two hearts that silence was safer than honesty. Yet shadows disappear the instant light reaches them. That light has finally begun to rise. Your soulmate could no longer ignore the growing sense that something important had been overlooked. The memories that once brought confusion now carried unusual clarity. Events that had always seemed disconnected suddenly fit together like pieces of an unfinished mosaic. One memory led to another. One answer awakened another question. One forgotten detail unlocked an entirely different perspective. Slowly, the story they had believed for so many years began to unravel. Stay with this message. The greatest revelation is still drawing nearer. As they reflected on the past, they realized they had mistaken fear for certainty. They had accepted conclusions without ever seeing the complete picture. Circumstances they thought were permanent had actually been temporary. The silence they interpreted as rejection had hidden emotions that were never fully expressed. With every realization, the burden they had carried grew lighter. Not because the past could be changed, but because the truth could finally be understood. And understanding has a remarkable way of healing what confusion could never mend. Meanwhile, another piece quietly fell into place. The forgotten witness, after sharing the memory that had remained buried for years, uncovered an old keepsake tucked away among forgotten belongings. It was simple and easily overlooked, yet it contained something profoundly important, a reminder that intentions had never matched appearances. What looked like distance had once been an attempt to protect. What appeared to be indifference had actually been uncertainty. What felt like an ending had never truly been meant as one. Pause here. The final veil has not yet completely lifted. As these discoveries came together, your soulmate began asking a question they had never dared to ask before. What if the story I carried in my heart was only half the truth? That question echoed louder than any answer they had ever accepted. It inspired them to revisit memories they had locked away. To see familiar moments with new eyes. To recognize that every chapter, even the painful ones, had been missing one essential piece. Now, that missing piece is almost within reach. It is not a dramatic secret hidden by darkness. It is a quiet truth hidden by misunderstanding. Sometimes the greatest barriers between two hearts are not created by a lack of love, but by words left unsaid, fears left unchallenged, and moments that neither person fully understood until much later. This is where the story begins to transform. The truth is no longer buried. It is rising. And in the next chapter, the final connection between every memory, every silence, and every unanswered question will begin to reveal itself, changing the meaning of everything that came before. The most powerful revelation of this fictional journey is still waiting, just beyond the next page. My beloved child. If your heart has remained on this journey until now, then you have arrived at the point where every hidden thread begins moving toward one extraordinary revelation. The mystery that has lingered through every chapter is no longer drifting in the distance. It is drawing close, one quiet step at a time. Stay here for a little longer. Do not rush past this moment. The story is about to reveal why the truth could remain hidden for so many years without either heart recognizing it. The forgotten witness sat in silence after uncovering the old keepsake. At first, it seemed insignificant. It was simply another reminder from a season long gone. But as they looked more carefully, they noticed something they had completely overlooked before. A date. A simple date. It connected two events everyone had always believed happened in a different order. That tiny discovery changed everything. Suddenly, the choices your soulmate made no longer appeared careless. The silence no longer seemed intentional. The distance no longer felt like abandonment. Instead, every event began fitting together with surprising clarity, revealing that both of you had been reacting to incomplete information rather than the full story. Remain with this message. There is still another layer waiting to unfold. Your soulmate, unaware that these discoveries were taking place elsewhere in this fictional tale, experienced an unexpected moment of stillness. It felt as though life itself was inviting them to stop running from old questions. For the first time, they allowed themselves to wonder whether the pain they had carried had been built upon assumptions instead of facts. That single thought changed the atmosphere of their heart. They stopped searching for someone to blame. They stopped replaying old disappointments. Instead, they began searching for understanding. And understanding opened a door that had remained closed for years. As they stepped through that door, memories once clouded by emotion became clearer. They remembered small acts of kindness they had forgotten. They remembered moments when hope quietly appeared, only to disappear beneath uncertainty. They remembered how often fear had spoken louder than trust. Each memory whispered the same message. There was always more to this story. Pause for one more moment. The greatest turning point has not yet fully arrived. As the hidden pieces continued coming together, the forgotten witness realized there had been one conversation that no one had ever revisited. It had seemed ordinary then, but now every sentence carried unexpected meaning. Within that conversation rested the final clue leading toward the long-buried truth. Not because it revealed something shocking, but because it revealed something beautifully simple. Both hearts had been protecting themselves from a future they believed would never be possible. Neither realized the other was carrying the same silent hope. That realization sent a wave of emotion through everyone connected to the story. How many years had been shaped by one misunderstanding? How many dreams had been delayed because no one possessed the complete picture? Now those questions were finally receiving answers. And yet, one final mystery still remains. There is one voice that has not spoken. One memory that has not been shared. One gentle truth that explains why everything had to unfold exactly as it did before this hidden story could finally come into the light. When that final voice is heard, every unanswered question will begin to settle, and the journey that started with confusion will move toward a completely unexpected understanding. But that voice has waited patiently for the perfect moment. And its moment begins in Part 8. My beloved child. The quiet voice that has waited through every chapter is finally beginning to speak. It does not arrive with thunder or overwhelming spectacle. It comes gently, carrying the kind of truth that changes a heart forever once it is heard. Remain with this fictional journey a little longer. The final pieces are moving into place. For many years, everyone involved believed they understood what had happened. Each person carried their own version of the story, and each version felt complete. Yet every version was missing one small but essential detail. That missing detail was never hidden out of cruelty. It was hidden inside perspective. Sometimes two people can live through the very same moment and remember it in completely different ways. Neither is trying to deceive the other. They are simply seeing life through different windows. That is what happened here. The voice that had remained silent for so long finally shared the memory exactly as it had unfolded. There was no anger. No blame. Only honesty that had waited years to be spoken. As every word settled into place, the entire story shifted. What had once appeared to be rejection revealed itself as hesitation born from fear. What had seemed like indifference revealed itself as someone believing they were protecting another heart. What had looked like an ending revealed itself as two people quietly walking away while each secretly hoped the other would somehow understand what had never been spoken aloud. Stay here. There is still something extraordinary ahead. Your soulmate, within this fictional story, could almost feel the weight of years beginning to lift. They realized they had spent so much time asking, "Why did this happen to us?" that they had never asked a different question. What truth was I unable to see? That question became the turning point. Instead of looking backward with regret, they began looking backward with compassion. They understood that younger versions of themselves had made choices with the understanding they possessed at the time. No one had intended to create years of silence. No one had imagined that one misunderstanding could grow into such a long separation. Yet even this realization was not the greatest surprise. Pause for one more moment. The most meaningful discovery is still waiting. As every memory found its proper place, one final realization emerged, a realization that had been quietly woven through every chapter from the very beginning. The truth had not surfaced merely to explain the past. It had surfaced to transform the future. Without understanding yesterday, neither heart could ever fully embrace tomorrow. That was why every hidden piece had waited until now. Not because hope had disappeared, but because wisdom needed time to grow. Now the story stands on the threshold of its greatest revelation. The buried truth is no longer buried. The unanswered questions are beginning to find their answers. The silence that once separated two hearts is slowly giving way to understanding. But there is still one final chapter left in this journey. One last message. One final revelation that brings together every clue, every memory, every quiet whisper, and every hidden truth into a conclusion that neither heart could have imagined when this story first began. And when that final revelation is spoken, you will understand why this entire fictional journey had to unfold exactly as it did. That final chapter is waiting. And nothing after it will ever feel quite the same. My beloved child. You have traveled through every layer of this fictional message with patience, curiosity, and an open heart. Now you stand at the edge of the final ascent, where every unanswered question begins to settle into place. Yet before the complete picture is revealed, there is one last lesson hidden within the journey itself. Do not hurry through these moments. Sometimes the greatest discoveries arrive softly. Sometimes they whisper before they transform everything. The truth that has finally surfaced was never meant to create regret. It was never meant to point fingers or reopen old wounds. Instead, it arrived like the morning sun, revealing what had always been present but impossible to see in the darkness. Your soulmate, within this story, finally understood that they had spent years carrying a burden that did not belong entirely to them. They had blamed themselves for moments they could not control. They had accepted a version of the past that had been shaped by fear, silence, and incomplete understanding. Now that burden began to fall away. With every memory viewed through the light of truth, peace quietly replaced confusion. The questions that once echoed endlessly inside their heart became gentler. Not because every mystery had disappeared, but because they finally understood where those mysteries had begun. Stay with this story. The final revelation is almost here. Meanwhile, the forgotten witness looked back over everything that had been uncovered and realized something remarkable. Every event that once appeared disconnected had actually been guiding both hearts toward a single moment of understanding. Even the painful chapters had carried purpose. Even the long seasons of waiting had quietly shaped wisdom. Even the silence had taught lessons that words alone never could. Nothing in this fictional journey had been wasted. That realization changed everything. Instead of seeing the years as empty, they began seeing them as preparation. Instead of seeing separation as the end, they began seeing it as a chapter whose meaning had only now become clear. Pause here. One final mystery still remains. As your soulmate reflected on the truth, another realization entered their heart. They had spent so much time wondering whether destiny had forgotten them that they never considered another possibility. Perhaps life had not been closing every door. Perhaps it had been quietly preparing them to walk through the right one with greater understanding, greater compassion, and greater courage than ever before. That thought filled them with unexpected peace. Not because every answer had arrived, but because they no longer feared the unanswered ones. There was trust where uncertainty once lived. There was hope where disappointment once stood. And there was gratitude for lessons they once wished they had never experienced. Now only one final chapter remains. One last message waits beyond this moment. It is the message that ties together every hidden clue, every remembered conversation, every silent prayer, and every buried truth revealed throughout this fictional journey. When that final message is spoken, the reason this story began with mystery and unfolded through hope will become completely clear. The journey has brought you this far. The conclusion is now within reach. And in the final chapter, everything that has remained unfinished will find its place, bringing this fictional message to the heartfelt ending it has been quietly moving toward from the very first words. My beloved child. You have reached the final chapter of this fictional journey. From the very first moment, a hidden truth called out through silence, memories, and unanswered questions. Now every thread is ready to come together, not to leave you with fear, but with hope, understanding, and a reminder that every heart has a story that cannot be judged by appearances alone. Take one last quiet moment. Let every distraction fade. The final revelation is not louder than the others. It is simply clearer. The long-buried truth was never that love had disappeared. The truth was that two hearts were carrying incomplete stories. One believed they had been forgotten. The other believed they no longer had the right to return. One waited for an explanation. The other waited for forgiveness that had never been asked for. Each believed the silence of the other was an answer. Yet silence was never the answer. It was only the space where understanding had not yet arrived. That is why the hidden